Hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster, and today we're going to be reviewing all the fashion documentaries. All of them. Unlike just about every other genre, fashion documentaries is a pretty niche one, and there really are truly not that many. We are going to dive straight in here, but hey, you should subscribe. Most of this channel is deep dive analysis videos into the nuances, stories, and artfulness of designer clothes. We will start with a huge one, McQueen. Undeniably one of the most anticipated fashion documentaries of all time. This gives a great look into the life and work of the dear beloved Lee McQueen. You probably already know about this one, so I'm going to just say that it's a must watch. Bring tissues when you do watch it. Let's move on. Okay, hang on real quick. So you need to stick with this video. There are some incredible documentaries that give some brilliant insights into the industry, into processes and stuff, and they are likely ones that you have never heard of. I strongly recommend that you do not just flip this off after the first 5 or 6 of them. I try to give recommendations as we go for like what part of the industry you want to be in and which ones you should watch, so you can kind of let that guide you a little bit. Dries. Following Dries Van Noten as he prepares his spring 2016 menswear show. This is one of the single best documentaries for giving you insight into a fashion designer's artistic process. And by the way, that is what you are looking for in all documentaries about artists. Insights into their process. Okay, back to it. We see the way that Dries Van Noten goes from inspiration to the runway, and it includes some absolutely brilliant and lesser known examples of what makes those results not only possible, but brilliant. It may come as a surprise to some, but this is my favorite fashion documentary of all time. If you like fashion at all, you have to watch this. Margiela, a great insight into what made Maison Margiela such a special and unique house. They interview tons of important figures, including the brand's co-founder, Jenny Meerens. Basically, all of the important players are included in this documentary except for Marty himself. The only downside here is that this might not be the best place to start with Margiela. For that, I would humbly recommend my own Margiela series. I created that series so that someone who knew nothing about Maison Margiela could get introduced to it properly. But if you're at all into the history and mythos of Margiela, this is a must watch. Margiela, in his own words, documentarian Rainer Holzheimer managed to get Martin Margiela to not only sit for interviews, but to explain the concepts behind his entire back catalog of work. In the film, we hear 90 minutes of selections from over 400 hours of interview footage with Martin Margiela explaining his own work. This documentary is beautifully intimate and rich in informational content. Considering that Martin is such a private person, the fact that this documentary can exist at all is a miracle. Before this, no one knew what country Martin lived in, let alone what his voice sounded like. I was lucky enough to attend the premiere of this documentary in New York, and when Martin spoke for the first time, there was an audible gasp in the audience. Truly magical stuff. Rainer Holzheimer is also the director of the Dries documentary, and he's apparently working on a third fashion doc that focuses on another fashion designer. The subject is still unknown. Valentino, the Last Emperor. Following one of the most legendary Italian designers of all time in the twilight of his career. This is easily one of the best fashion documentaries if you're interested in couture and couture processes. It can be a little slow at times, but we get some excellent insight into what makes haute couture different than pret-a-porter. Lots to learn in this one. Did I mention that these are in no particular order? They are in no particular order. The story of Philipp Plein. This intimate portrayal of Philipp Plein's early career and legacy is masterfully executed. It goes into a ton of detail about how Plein built his empire and stationed himself at the top of the cultural zeitgeist. This documentary, folks, is a Patreon exclusive, and I strongly recommend that you join the Patreon so that you can watch it. This was probably the most fun video to make that I have ever done. You get to see the dumpster fire up close without the risk of inhaling the fumes. For this and many other exclusive videos, you must join the Patreon right now. Let's move on. Dior and I. An intimate view into Dad Simmons' first season as the creative director at Dior as they prepare his first haute couture season ever. We get some excellent insight into what makes the job of creative director so difficult and some interesting anecdotes about the difficulties of making a global fashion machine run efficiently. Also some really good clips of Raf talking about his overall body of work and some killer samples of more advanced technical processes at a house with a massive budget. If you want to be a sewist or a creative director, this should be at the top of your watch list. Yohji Yamamoto, Dressmaker. A close-up look at Yohji Yamamoto as he prepares a collection for the runway. As a documentary, this might not be a fantastic movie, but if you're a Yohji fanatic, you'll probably love it like I did. The thing about Yohji on camera is that he can't help but make things feel very intimate. You feel very close to him when he speaks. We have a lot of clips of Yohji talking about his process in very broad, vague terms, and a little bit of insight into how a Yohji collection gets made. The most touching parts, again, are the more personable elements where the viewer feels like they know Yohji better as a person. Again, if you're into his work, you need to watch it. Notebook on Cities and Clothes, a very early fashion documentary made before fashion docs were cool. This is another look inside of Yohji's studio as he prepares a collection back in the 80s. Some viewers might be disappointed by how little this has to do with the actual making of clothes. The director, Wim Wenders, is a very avant-garde documentarian, and sections of this are more about the art of documentary making than they are about the subject, Yohji Yamamoto. But honestly, the documentary's style is a good fit for Yohji. It's fittingly opaque and mysterious. It's a good accompaniment to the newer one as well. I suggest watching Notebook on Cities and Clothes first, though. In the genre of fashion documentaries, this is a classic. It's well worth watching. Diana Vreeland, The Eye Has to Travel. A look back at the life and work of Diana Vreeland, the editor-in-chief of Vogue. Especially if you're going into fashion journalism, this is a must-watch. This gives us some really good insight into the way that Vogue was run before Anna Wintour took the reins. We get a view into what is widely considered to be the golden era of fashion editorials when the budgets were absolutely massive. Also, Diana Vreeland was such an awesome person and character. There's actually a book about her that's just a collection of her memos. That is how wacky a person she was. Truly one of the most fun people in fashion history. Well worth a watch. Iris. This is a close-up look at Iris Apfel. It's so common now to look at a famous person and be like, yeah, but what is their actual job? Like, what do they do? Okay, Iris was that, but in the 1950s. Spoiler, she worked in textiles and interior design. But really, this documentary is more about personal style, and I typically tend to shy away from stuff that's intended to teach me about personal style, but there is nothing better in that niche than the documentary Iris. This woman is a personal style dynamo. Simply getting to look into her personal life, even as a very old lady, is breathtaking. If you want to be a stylist or get some just wild inspiration for dressing yourself better, this is for you. Bill Cunningham, New York. Bill Cunningham is the single most legendary street style photographer in history. He has a rather good autobiography out that mostly deals with his career as a milliner. This documentary focuses almost entirely on his career as a photographer. Bill has outstanding taste and a nearly literal encyclopedic knowledge of modern fashion. This documentarian was lucky enough to complete this project just 6 years before Bill passed away. Maybe my favorite thing about Bill is that he's able to identify and loudly critique the problems of the fashion world while in his own actions literally being the change that he wished to see in the fashion industry. And all of this while being one of the friendliest people you've ever seen. His level of passion is something that I personally aspire to in a huge way. If you are looking to get into trend forecasting specifically, or if you just want to watch a mega wholesome documentary, this is it. The Gospel According to Andre, covering the life and work of the undisputed king of fashion writing, Andre Leon Talley. This documentary takes us through the events, decisions, people, and hard work that made Andre who he is today. Personally, I preferred Andre's autobiography, The Chiffon Trenches, but to be honest, Andre is such a magnificent and sharp-witted person that even if this isn't my favorite fashion documentary, I found myself hanging on every word he was saying throughout. If you're going into fashion journalism, this is for you. Unzipped. This documentary follows Isaac Mizrahi as he prepares to show his fall 1994 collection. This is one of the first fashion documentaries ever made, and it's covering a designer that I'm guessing most viewers on this channel are not super familiar with. This film gives you insight into a side of 90s fashion that isn't really talked about very much now. Fashion history, friends, this is for you. Anti-fashion in the 90s. An extremely ambitious documentary project that attempts to wrap up the fashion zeitgeist of the 1990s into one neat package. The scope of this project is honestly too big in my opinion, and it inevitably skips over a lot of important stuff, but considering its scope, this is executed extremely well. Plus, there's a ton of rare footage in this that I haven't seen anywhere else. So if you're brand new to fashion, this is honestly the best documentary for you to start with. You should begin here, and I think this is available for free on YouTube. The September issue. Simply put, this is how the Vogue September issue gets made from the perspective of Anna Wintour, the editor-in-chief. While this isn't a very realistic look at fashion journalism generally, it is fascinating to see the ins and outs of how things happen at the very, very top. It'll also be interesting to see how this process, documented in 2007, changes as we move farther and farther away from print media domination. Franca, Chaos and Creation. This is a broad sweep through the history of Italian Vogue through the lens of its editor-in-chief, Franca Sozzani. For those who don't know, Italian Vogue is big different than the other Vogues in a great, great way. This film covers some of the most controversial and striking editorials the publication ever put out. This documentary is required watching for our photography and stylist friends. You learn how to move past the pretty girl, pretty dress, pretty location paradigm, and instead you learn how some of the most gripping editorials in fashion history got made. The first Monday in May, documenting the process that leads up to the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute's annual gala, Fashion's Super Bowl. Okay, so this documentary is really good for reasons that you wouldn't normally expect. The real gold here is getting insight into the process of one of the smartest people in fashion, Andrew Bolton. He's the curator at the Met's Costume Institute and the Bay of Tom Brown. Andrew is one of the best fashion educators currently living. In this documentary, we get a great glimpse at what makes the Met's exhibitions so excellent, and they get into some surprisingly good detail with it. If you're going into curation, museums, or fashion history, this is a must-watch. Scatter My Ashes at Bergdorf's. First off, R.I.P. Bergdorf Goodmans. Secondly, this documentary is surprisingly fun. Big chunks of it are just celebrities assuring you that Bergdorf's is an institution. But there are some great stories in here and tidbits of info about how crazy and completely different the world of luxury personal shopping is. This movie isn't at the top of the must-watch list, but it's a solid background watch for sure. I actually really enjoyed it. Fresh Dressed. Okay, so this documentary is awesome. It documents an era of streetwear that doesn't get discussed much at all now. While most kids would maybe cite Supreme or Stussy as the origin of streetwear, this documentary profiles a ton of tastemakers about their experiences with the actual origin of streetwear that definitely goes farther back than either Stussy or Supreme. This documentary isn't info heavy because that's not really what the goal is here. They're trying to set a mood and offer inspiration about a slice of fashion history that's at risk of being forgotten. And they do that excellently well. Advanced Style. This one honestly isn't for everyone, but it is good. It's just an overview of these older women with really advanced style. As a documentary, it's kind of cute and wholesome and fun. But if you're going into styling, especially editorial styling, this is one to watch and rewatch and to probably take notes on. Zoolander. This 2001 intimate portrait of male model Derek Zoolander is surprisingly good. It manages to balance out the rather crazy story of how he was a whistleblower for one of the biggest fashion supply chain abuses in history with the day-to-day struggles that come with high fashion modeling, and additionally Derek's family life. The amount of informational value in this film is huge. I don't hear people talking about this documentary enough now, and it's almost 20 years old, but it's as relevant now as it was when it was released. The Tenths, a look at the business side of how New York Fashion Week was once organized. This is one of the documentaries that is so specific, I'm pleasantly shocked that it was made at all. There are some incredible pieces of information in this movie. I learned a ton from it, especially if you're going into fashion business or if you're just going into events in or outside of the fashion world. This should be a priority for you to watch. Additionally, if you're dying to understand how the industry works generally, this is a great documentary and I've never heard anyone else talk about it. Go watch it. The Director, an intimate look at the processes that led to a runway show at Gucci during Frida Giannini's creative direction. She was the creative director between Tom Ford and Alessandro Michele. Okay, so this is honestly not my favorite. Ultimately, I just don't feel like I learned a ton from watching this one. I may be a bit biased here because Frida's Gucci is my least favorite era, but it mostly seemed to just be fashion talk, which is to say A lot of words from a lot of different people about heritage and beauty and artistry without ever giving really any details or footage to back any of that up. I wanted this to be better because I wanted to learn about what is admittedly a big gap in my knowledge about Gucci's history, but I truly didn't like it because I feel like it didn't deliver. Blue Gold. This one covers the gold rush of people trying to hunt down original Levi's jeans. It shows the process of how some vintage denim can go from a box in someone's barn to the shelves of a specialty vintage store with a $1,200 price tag. It's a more formal look at the rise of resale culture that's come to dominate the fashion market in an unprecedented way currently. This documentary is a ton of fun, and if you're a menswear nerd especially, this is required watching. Jeremy Scott, the people's designer. As the title suggests, it's a portrait of Jeremy as he's designing a collection. I honestly really like it when we get some insight into a more niche designer's process. It's good to get some variety that goes deeper than the massive houses with infinite budgets. This isn't the most mind-blowing one on the list, but if you're looking to become a designer yourself, these portraits are very valuable for you to learn about what you're getting into. Very Ralph. Overview of Ralph Lauren's entire career, how he cornered his own market, changed the landscape of fashion, and built a damn empire. There is no shortage of praise in the world for Ralph Lauren, but I at least was hard-pressed to articulate specifically why that praise was warranted until I watched this. If you want to be a designer, and even if you don't much care for Ralph's work in particular, this is a good one to watch. House of Z. Okay, so this documentary covers the rise and fall of Zac Posen's image and brand. I suspect that a lot of people who watch this channel fancy themselves too cool to care about Zac Posen, but you don't need to like his design specifically to watch this. Ultimately, this is an awesome film. It reveals the forces that can destroy a creative fashion brand. It's an intimate portrayal of what selling out actually means, and I can assure you, it is not what you are thinking. If you want to start or continue to own your own brand, I demand that you watch this documentary. The True Cost. I don't think it's any secret to any of the viewers that I think that fast fashion absolutely sucks. And it doesn't just look terrible and wear out quickly. Fast fashion is literally destroying people's lives. This is one of those documentaries that will make you make promises to yourself about changing your buying habits, and it should. Basically, if you've ever bought a pair of jeans for under $50 retail, you should watch this film and understand what you're supporting. Mademoiselle C. Profile of the former fashion editor at French Vogue, Karine Roitfeld, as she launches her, at the time, new publication CR Fashion Book. Much like the other docs about major editors, this one struggles to hold relevance because print is struggling so much in the modern world. However, if you're wanting to start your own publication, whether that's print or digital, this is worth watching because it's in your wheelhouse. It's always helpful to watch professionals go about and talk about their day-to-day jobs, even if it's a little over-glamorized. Marc Jacobs at Louis Vuitton. This is another in the most popular category of fashion docs that follow a specific designer while preparing a collection. It's always fascinating to see these when they're at huge houses like Louis Vuitton because the budget is so big that we get to see some really interesting processes that we probably wouldn't see anywhere else. If you're a designer, you should watch all of the documentaries that are in this subgenre, but this one is extra good. And last, and I can assure you, not least, the documentaries that I still need to watch. Those include Men of Cloth, Chasing Beauty, Sneakerheadz with a Z, About Face, Versailles 73, Manolo, the boy who made shoes for lizards, Madman, the Steve Madden story, and Casablancas, the man who loved women. Did I miss any? I'd love to hear about it if I did. For anyone who does not know, Patreon is a platform that allows you to support creators like myself if you really love their content. These videos, on average, make about $30 on YouTube, so YouTube is not a feasible source of income. But Patreon allows me to actually do this full time. So if you do love this channel a whole bunch, I'd ask that you please go to patreon.com/blissfoster, sign up, kick me a few bucks per month, and know that you are supporting this channel and keeping it alive. Also, go follow me on Instagram. We do a ton of fun little projects over there. Plus, you know, fits. I love you, bro. Bye.